Good luck with everyone. Good morning. Thanks, Jasmine. Welcome to our Nilliajut session today. I'm excited to be able to speak to you all this morning a couple of times, but really to cede the floor to other Inuit leaders and those who are in the weeds, if you will, on the work that we're doing on security, defense, and sovereignty across Inuit Nunangat. I was thinking about how to tell this story and how to orient everyone in the room to how Inuit feel or where we are at the moment. And I couldn't help but think of this winter when my eldest son, Paniusik, who is a diehard Colorado Avalanche fan, for his 18th birthday, got him a ticket to go to the Bell Center to watch Colorado play Montreal. And I promise, for those of you who don't know anything about hockey or don't care, there's a part in this for you. And he has this very special retro jersey, and it's of the Quebec Nordiques. So it's his favorite player, Cale Makar, and he's going to the Bell Center with this Quebec Nordiques jersey. And I had to kind of caution him that he might get some anger directed his way because of the history of the Quebec Nordiques being relocated to Colorado and the feud between the Quebec Nordiques and the Montreal Canadiens, especially in the 1980s. I grew up watching line brawls and all-out bench clearing brawls between those teams any given year. But he had no idea of that history, and he took note. And during the course of the game, I think a couple of people said something, but largely he was unaffected, and he got to cheer for his favorite team. Montreal did win, so I was happy about that. But he got an experience, and it was largely positive. And I give this to you because it's a situation where there is a huge history. And even within 20 or 30 years, a lot, especially in the passing of generations, the passing of time, a lot of things smooth over, but the realities remain. And he had no idea of the realities of the NHL history and his favorite team's history. I would say we're in a similar moment with Canada, where Canada has rediscovered the Arctic. There's a huge focus on security and defense. And some people remember that history, some people still live it, but many people just have no idea and have never had any idea. So we're in this moment where we're having to educate, and to bring it back to the metaphor, we're having to educate not just the Arctic fans, but all Canadians, those who've never really had an interest in the Arctic whatsoever. And it's really difficult to try to educate and to try to make people understand how passionately we feel that we are the central actors in this space, but in the face of millions and millions of Canadians who really don't understand the history and don't understand the rights that we have or the passion that we bring to these arguments. So today, this event is seeking to reorient the conversation. We're hosting this to promote our Inuit vision of the Arctic in relation to security and defense initiatives in our homeland. The Arctic is receiving global attention as a military and economically strategic region. Many nations perceive the Arctic not as the homeland of a vibrant people and society, but as a depository of mineral wealth, a potential shortcut for international shipping, and a staging ground for military competition. Dozens of non-Arctic states have developed their own Arctic policies, and they seek to gain influence in the region through research and economic development. An increasing number of Arctic conferences, summit, and fora are being convened by others in which our governance structures, our self-determination, and our priorities are overlooked or not discussed at all. We're observing an increase not only in the activity around the Arctic and discussions, but also the use of the Arctic as well, through increased ship traffic, research vessels, through increased interest in subsurface mining and potential mines, and also then in the major projects context by the Government of Canada and non-Arctic actors, such as provinces in southern Canada, who reimagine our homeland as their shipping pathways to greater prosperity and success. More than a third of Canada is Inuit land. Inuit Nunagat makes up 40% of Canada's landmass and 72% of its coastline, and encompasses the entirety of Canada's Arctic territory. The region is made up of the Inuvialuit settlement region in the Northwest Territories, Nunavut, Nunavik in northern Quebec, and Nunatsiavut in northern Labrador. Our people make up 82% of this region's population. Inuit Nunagat is governed exclusively through modern treaties that set out Inuit rights, jurisdiction, and decision-making authority, and through Inuit treaty organizations that represent each region and implement these agreements. So consider that 40% of Canada's landmass is either owned outright in fee simple title or co-managed through the implementation of our modern treaties with provinces, territories, and the federal government. We may only have 51 communities and only 70,000 people, but we have an outsized place within the construction of Canada as a nation state. Inuit harvesters living in our 51 communities monitor tens of thousands of square kilometers of land and marine area that Inuit co-manage with the federal government and the region. Inuit land use and occupancy of Inuit Nunagat underpins Canada's sovereignty claims to the entirety of the Northwest Passage. Inuit harvesters also monitor vast land and marine areas adjacent to our communities that the Canadian Coast Guard and the Canadian Armed Forces currently do not have the capacity to monitor and secure alone. The militarization of the Canadian Arctic began during the Second World War, when the region became a vital transit corridor for transatlantic ferry flights and strategic bombing operations. That history continues to fundamentally shape where our people live, the infrastructure we have access to, and the experiences that we have had with colonization. The United States entering World War II in 1941 radically transformed our homeland. And that may seem like a very odd parallel and connection. At the time, Nunatsiavut and Newfoundland and Labrador writ large were a part of the British colony. And it was largely in consideration of what was happening in England that the United States entered into the Second World War. Also, as Canada, the patriotism that Canada had for its allyship with Britain at the time, what I would say is a degree more than it does today. And the consideration then for the US to set up military sites across our homeland, and also in Greenland and in Alaska, happened directly following the United States' entry into World War II. It also then continued and ramped up in the Cold War era to follow. Much of the infrastructure that we rely on, including airstrips in Inuit hub communities such as Inuvik, Iqaluit, and Kuujjuaq, were built by the American military during World War II or shortly thereafter, and inherited by Canada. The idea of where these sites were was based on purely strategic military longitude and latitude, and also the conditions within, the geographic conditions within communities. So the massive infrastructure in, say, Goose Bay in Labrador or in Iqaluit was not based on where people lived or building off of cities that already existed. It was the creation out of nothing, if you will, that was strategically to the advantage of those military planners. The same could be said for the distant early warning sites that sprung up across our homeland during the 1950s that had massive impacts on the environmental health of our homeland, but then also the way in which people either were moved or the way people were enticed to work. So at some points in time, it was advantageous for the military to use Inuit labor, and in some points in time, it was advantageous for the military to completely exclude Inuit and not allow them to access any of those military sites. It isn't a coincidence that our TB epidemic also started in this time period. It also shows the vast inequity at that time, where the building of the infrastructure in Inuit Nunangat was one of the largest construction projects ever done globally. And by the 1950s, there were daily flights from US cities and other strategic bases into Inuit Nunangat and out of it. But those Inuit who had tuberculosis were taken by ship for years at a time to southern Sanatoria, which took 3 months or more to get to those places in the south, and then could only be brought home the next summer or the following summers. It's really important to be able to articulate this history and how fundamentally it has shaped our current reality, to be able to understand the work that we need to do here today. It also brings into the conversation about what is Canada. Canada would not be an Arctic state without Inuit. Inuit legitimize Canada's claims to the Arctic and are the foremost experts on the Arctic. However, Canada trails many other Arctic states in developing its Arctic territory, exposing our country to security threats, sovereignty violations, and foreign interference. As in the past during World War II and the Cold War, Canada's Arctic policy has been largely reactive to real or perceived security threats, rather than a more proactive vision for bringing its Arctic territory into the rest of the country. Our governance structures, our self-determination, and our priorities for our communities and regions are Canada's foundation for Arctic strength, and need to be at the center of the federal government's approach to Arctic security. The challenge we face is to persuade Canada to adopt a more holistic and visionary Arctic policy that recognizes and supports our contributions to Canada by closely coordinating its decision-making with our people. It also means to implement the constructive arrangements that we have forged over the last 40 years with the Canadian state, largely our modern treaties, but also through the implementation of those treaties, our co-management bodies that ensure that we have decision-making powers on wildlife, on planning, on the environment. Inuit participation in the development and implementation of security and defense initiatives in our homeland can minimize harm and maximize benefits for our people and our communities. Our perspectives need to inform Canada's Arctic security and defense policies, and Canada needs to partner with Inuit to advance shared priorities for the region. If we do not define the future of our shared home together, it will be defined for us by actors who do not live here in our homeland and do not answer to our people, and also do not carry the consequences of those decisions. It is a positive achievement that we have made space for collaboration in the last 10 years, including through the Inuit Crown Partnership Committee, and can use that space to work through these issues together. However, decisions are being urgently made now across a wide range of issues, from national defense to infrastructure to resource development, that will have transformative impact on Inuit Nunangat, all in the name of national security. We must find a way to more deeply integrate Inuit into the decision-making. I look forward to the conversation today as an opportunity to discuss and identify solutions to these and related challenges. Inuit unity throughout this is a core principle that I want to share as an asset for Canada. We have a democracy that stands beside the Canadian democracy through each of our treaty organizations with their democratically elected leaders who sit as the decision-making authorities on the board of directors for Inuit Tapiriit Kanatami and the Inuit Circumpolar Council Canada. Therefore, when Canadian Inuit speak to the government or speak to Canadians, be reassured that these are the democratic wishes and positions of Canadian Inuit. Canada is always looking for certainty. I hear that conversation quite a bit, especially in the natural resource sector. For Inuit, we have mobilized to give Canada that certainty for Inuit rights and the implementation of Inuit rights and the partnership that we wish to forge with this country. We can only go so far. We have to be met, and the relationship is not always that we come 95 or 99% of the way, and Canada takes one step. We need a more strategic and also sustainable partnership with this country and the decisions this country makes in relation to our homeland. We have seen in the last year Prime Minister Mark Carney make many deals, whether or not it's emerging markets in Asia or the Pan-Pacific, or with the European Union and parts of Europe. The Prime Minister has talked very candidly about how the old way of doing business is not feasible anymore, and it needs to be replaced with a new structure. For Inuit leadership, we are in a very similar position. We understand that the world was not the way that it was even 2 years ago, and security, defense, and sovereignty are top of mind for this country. Also, major projects in the consideration for the Arctic as a part of the strategic national assets for resource extraction. Now it's our turn to say a very similar thing. If the partnership with Canada is not on the table, if we are not going to be respected partners, then should we not be looking for other partners as well to uphold our interests? This isn't a threat. It is a practical consideration that I'm sure PMO makes every day about the decisions they make on behalf of Canadians. So for Inuit, on behalf of our people and in defense of our constructive arrangements with this nation state, we must use our power and our assets to be able to withstand this latest wave of interest in our homeland, not necessarily our people. We need to assert our rights within the space that is not necessarily open to considering them just on their own merit. So this today is meant to be a conversation where we can figure out how to do all that together. Canada is our preferred partner. It is the partner that we have spent the last 50 years working with. We have no interest in forging other paths. I would say just like Canada had no interest in forging other paths outside of the US and the relationship that we had with the US prior to a couple of years ago. But these are strange moments and strange times. The best we can do is work through them in partnership and to build upon the understanding and knowledge that we have about our shared past and the respect for our rights and the way in which we can all uphold Arctic sovereignty, create sustainability and wealth for all Canadians, and ensure there's equity for Inuit in this entire space. Nakumek, thank you.
Riyanami, President Obed, what a powerful and promising opening address. I hope that really sets the tone for the expectations today, that this can be a forum for conversation and dialogue and productive future solutions-oriented. To that end, it's my pleasure to welcome our keynote for the day, the Honorable Rebecca Alty, Minister for Crown-Indigenous Relations.
Thank you and good morning. Big thank you, President Obed, for the invitation to participate today and for your really powerful and important messages this morning. It's definitely got me thinking, and will be relaying that to my colleagues. I'd also like to thank Inuit Tapiriit Kanatami for bringing us together and everyone who worked hard to organize this conference. It's an honor to join you here today on the traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. I'd like to thank my colleagues, Parliamentary Secretary Brendan Hanley, as well as MP Laurie Udlaut. Where's Laurie? She was there we go, Laurie. Thank you for joining, and thank you again for your tireless advocacy in Parliament. Gathering Inuit leaders, experts, youth, partners, and decision makers from across Inuit Nunangat and across Canada for conversations like this takes tremendous effort. Growing up in the north, although I say the north and not the Arctic because Yellowknife's quite a bit southern than that, I know that decisions made in Ottawa can sometimes feel very far away from the realities people experience every day in northern communities, as President just outlined so well. That's one reason why conversations like these matter so much. Because while Arctic defense is about our national security, it's also fundamentally about the security of people and the well-being of communities. As I'm sure you know, you'd have to be living under a rock, there's more attention on the Arctic today than there's been in a long time. The choices we make now about defense, about infrastructure, and about development will shape communities across Inuit Nunangat for generations, and we have to make sure that they're being shaped for the best. It's essential that this renewed attention is guided by the priorities, leadership, and lived realities of Inuit. For that reason, I want to take a moment to recognize the important work of ITK and Inuit leaders in developing the recently released Inuit Nunangat Poverty Reduction Strategy. And if you haven't read it, I do recommend reading it this weekend. This strategy reflects the knowledge, experience, and leadership of Inuit and sets out a clear path forward grounded in Inuit priorities. It also serves as an important reminder of the realities that many Inuit continue to face every day. By working together, and supporting Inuit-led solutions, we can help create lasting improvements in housing, food security, education, economic opportunity, and overall well-being for Inuit across the country. As we move forward on this work together, we know that in order to strengthen the North and build a more prosperous future, Inuit knowledge and leadership must guide our actions. When Inuit participate in decision-making and help shape the future of their communities, Canada is stronger. When Inuit priorities are reflected in policies and investments, Canada is stronger. And when Inuit are partners in building the Arctic, Canada is stronger. Together, we're laying the foundations of a stronger, more independent, and more resilient Canadian economy, one that will endure change through certainty and uncertainty. Earlier this year, Prime Minister Carney was in Yellowknife to announce our $35 billion plan. That plan involved the Mackenzie Valley Highway, Tulsa Hydro expansion, the Arctic Economic Security Corridor, but in November, we also announced the Iqaluit Hydro Project. Together with investments like the $1 billion Arctic Infrastructure Fund, these initiatives will connect communities, cut emissions, and strengthen long-term prosperity across the North. But that's just the beginning and not the end. Because while we fast-track the major investments and major infrastructure, we need to create new opportunities, defend ourselves, and build a stronger, more resilient economy. We also need to be investing in people and communities. That's why we're delivering the Building Community Strong Fund, a $51 billion investment in the infrastructure Canadians rely on every day. Through that fund, we're investing $50 million to support the first Inuit-led university in Canada, Inuit Nunangat University in Arviat. This is a transformative step that will strengthen Canada's Arctic leadership and drive new ideas and research in a rapidly changing region. We're also taking action on housing, continuing to support Inuit-led solutions through funding delivered directly to Inuit treaty organizations. Inuit communities will also benefit from the recently announced increase in funding for Indigenous partners under the Urban, Rural, and Northern Indigenous Housing Strategy. Building on the $197.5 million that was released a few years ago and delivered by Inuit treaty organizations under the strategy, Inuit partners with this new funding will determine how their new funding will be allocated to meet the housing needs in Inuit Nunavut. And earlier this year, we reached an agreement in principle with Nunavut partners to build up to 750 homes through the Building Canada Homes initiative. At the same time, we're investing $2.7 million in a modular housing factory in Nunavut, supporting local jobs and the capacity to build up to 40 homes a year right in the territory. Because stronger communities start with the basics, and that means safe, reliable, affordable housing. All of these investments affirm a simple reality. Strong Arctic security depends on strong northern communities. The people who live, work, hunt, harvest, and raise their families in the north and across Inuit Nunavut are central to Canada's prosperity and sovereignty in the Arctic. But as the Prime Minister has said, it's not just what we build, it's how we build. We know that when we build new infrastructure and advance major projects across the north, success depends on working alongside Inuit and northern communities, respecting Inuit rights, and upholding our duty to consult and modern treaty obligations. We can only move forward together. We already have a strong foundation in the modern treaties between the Inuit and the Crown. These agreements set out how we work together and make decisions. We need to keep bringing them to life in real and practical ways. For me, that means making sure projects reflect community priorities, respect Inuit rights, and bring lasting benefits for Northerners. Along with important investments, we're also advancing a renewed Arctic agenda grounded in Canada's Arctic foreign policy and in the Arctic and Northern Policy Framework. These policies are supported by modern treaties and agreements that place Northerners and Inuit right holders at the center, from vision to results. Looking ahead, we'll continue to strengthen our partnership through the Inuit Crown Partnership Committee, which is meeting in Kuujjuaq later this month. These meetings provide important opportunities to discuss shared priorities and the actions we're taking together to support Inuit self-determination. Building the North is a shared responsibility. It requires sustained partnership to create opportunities, support local economies, and build a prosperous Arctic for future generations. Today, we've heard about community safety, infrastructure, economic growth, and Inuit-led approaches. All of this demonstrates that working together isn't one decision. It's something that we have to keep doing step by step. Together, we're laying the foundations of a stronger, more independent, and more resilient country. In the near term, we know there will be some unevenness as Canada navigates global uncertainty and external pressures. But beneath that volatility, the foundation is taking hold. The early signs are encouraging, and we're not stopping there. There's still a lot more work to do. So thank you for the opportunity to be part of today's conversation and for all the work that you're doing and will continue to do to shape the future of the Arctic. That future will be built in partnership, step by step, together, and I'm proud to be doing that work alongside you. Kuyanamik, merci, thank you, and masicho.